Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Am I audible well?
Yes, Prabhu.
Have you made me a host?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, thank you. Hare Krishna, thank you everyone for joining us for today evening Gita Essence program. So without any further ado, we'll begin our evening program. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatai Deshatarine Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we welcome you all for the another session of this Gita Essence program, overview of Bhagavad Gita, which is based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So we'll be discussing chapter 6 today of Bhagavad Gita. But before we start with it, let us quickly understand or do a quick recap of chapter 5 and understand that how chapter 6 begins. What's the connection between chapter 5 and chapter 6? In chapter 5, we saw that how Lord Shri Krishna, Arjuna have asked Krishna that what is greater, what is better? Is karma yoga or renunciation? So Lord Shri Krishna then speaks at length about karma yoga, glorifies karma yoga, and tells Arjuna that how karma yoga is an easy and effective process to attain self-realization, which means freedom from material miseries and revival of one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Arjuna heard this, his doubts about renunciation, karma yoga, or karma yoga versus jnana yoga, they were all cleared. However, Arjuna pondered at that point of time, my dear Lord, how does a person act in karma yoga? What does it mean? How do we act in karma yoga? At that point of time, Lord Shri Krishna gave 3 points or 3-step formula, what it means to act in karma yoga. And Lord Shri Krishna said, first, keeping mind and senses under control. Second, act without attachment, which means no desire for results. And how do we cultivate detachment? Is by using the results in the service of the Lord, understanding it. This is the gift of the Lord. So reciprocating with the Lord. And third, be very clear with the aim of engagement. Why am I performing my duties? What is the purpose? And that is to purify my consciousness. And that is the whole idea about it. So in the second and third point is very clear how to do it. The process is already prescribed. But the first point, where Lord Shri Krishna says keeping mind and senses under control, is not elaborated by the Lord so far. How to control the mind? How do we do so? So that subject matter, how to control the mind, is elaborated in chapter 6. Before we get into it, let's take a quick poll here, and let's start with the first question. And the question for all of you on the screen that you can see is, how easy or difficult you think is to bring your mind under control? Then we'll be able to appreciate the discussion that Lord Shri Krishna have in 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is all about controlling the mind. Do you think it's easy? I have no problem. Mind is always under my control. Is moderately or very difficult? Or you think it's impossible, Prabhu, just tried so many times, it doesn't work out. So Prabhu, you can manage the poll. When devotees have answered it, they're taking their time, that's all right. I'll continue our discussion. So just to give you an understanding on the subject, let's quote Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Now, Patanjali writes in Yoga Sutras where he compares mind to a monkey. Now, as you know of monkeys are always very restless, disturbed. Oh, what happened? Okay, I don't know what happened. Somebody tweaked with the poll, I guess. So anyways, most of you said difficult. Some very few people said it's easy or moderate. I'm closing it now. I don't know what happened in that. Most of you had already responded. Anyways, let's come back to the Patanjali point. So Patanjali, okay, all right. Patanjali compares the mind with a monkey. Why monkey? As we all know, the nature of monkey is very restless, very disturbed, and very difficult to control. And if you have ever visited Vrindavan, you have an experience of leelas of monkey, you know, how they create a terror in Vrindavan. To give you an example, just a side point, once there was a debate between a devotee of Lord Ram and a devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. And the debate was, who is greater? Is Krishna more Bhaktavasala or Lord Ram is more Bhaktavasala? So here a devotee of Lord Ram and devotee of Lord Shri Krishna are having back and forth, and they're quoting many, many references and so forth. Finally, the devotee of Lord Ram said to the devotee of Lord Shri Krishna, he said, my dear friend, listen to this. Your Lord Shri Krishna herded the cows. The cows are very peaceful animals. And my Lord Ram, he directed the army of monkeys. And when this Brajvasi, the devotee of Lord Shri Krishna, heard this, he said, yes, now I accept my defeat. Lord Ram is superior because he controlled the monkey, no doubt about it. So it's just a side point, the jokes apart, but the point is, yes, to control the mind is very, very difficult. And in this particular chapter, Arjuna is going to express the same concern that, my dear Lord, I can control the wind, but to control the mind is almost impossible. Now imagine if Arjuna speaks like this, then what is the hope for us? We are living in a world of constant distractions and temptations, and probably none of us are as qualified as Arjuna. To give you an example of a situation of a mind of a modern day man, so maybe you can understand that how troubled is a situation for a person today. Imagine an intoxicated monkey. You know, mind is compared to a monkey. So we are giving an example of a mind of a modern day man. Consider an intoxicated monkey who has drank a wine. Now imagine that his tail is tied with a pointed bush. Now, anyways, monkey is restless. On top, he becomes intoxicated. And now his tail is tied with a pointed bush. How painful and how difficult for it would be for a monkey to sit idle now or sit peacefully. And finally, that monkey has been put into a cage filled with scorpions. And now all the scorpions begins to bite this monkey. Very miserable condition, terrible, terrible condition. So what this analogy represents, what is this situation of a monkey represents or indicates about a mind? Now, the monkey was intoxicated. In today's time, similarly, every individual in a lack of proper spiritual knowledge is intoxicated by ahankar, false ego. And how does that false ego manifest? I am the controller, I am the proprietor, I am the enjoyer, I am the doer. Everyone thinks that I am the supreme controller and proprietor. So that's intoxication. That monkey was pricked by bushes. You know, the bush tied to his tail. So what does it indicate for us, or indicates for a person, a modern day man? Similarly, a modern day man constantly is pricked by anger. That is, he's always agitated. Anger is a younger brother of Kama. Kamesha Krodesha. Anger is said to be Anuj of Kama. Kama is unfulfilled desires. When desires are not fulfilled, person becomes agitated and angry. And in today's day and time, everyone is filled with so many desires. Of course, it is impossible for the Lord also to fulfill all of our desires. That's the situation. And when desires are not fulfilled, a person becomes angry. In essence, everyone is angry. In essence, that's a symptom of Kali Yuga. Sukadeva Goswami says in Srimad Bhagavatam, more or less everyone is agitated and disturbed. And the third thing that we described about the monkey was he was put in a cage which was filled with scorpions, and the monkey was bitten by a scorpion. So, how this modern man is bitten? He is bitten by envy. Just cannot tolerate, becomes very difficult if someone else is more successful. And in such a situation, imagine if a person is having that state of mind, where he is intoxicated by ahankar, he thinks I am the best, I am the supreme master, supreme king, and where he is pricked constantly by an anger, his mind is always disturbed and agitated, and on top of it, he is envious of others' well-being and success. What is a hope for today's person or today's man or a woman to perform yoga. And precisely, if you think about it, this is a situation of a person, as Krishna would explain in this chapter, of a person who has failed to control his mind. By the way, do you agree? Do you think this is what is the situation of today's men? This is how they are troubled by ahankara, false ego. I've enabled the chat. If you feel, you can reply yes or no if you relate with this example. He's always disturbed and agitated because of anger and the envy. This scorpio of envy is constantly biting a person in today's day and time. If you say you think yes, say yes. If not, that's all right. So with this, let's begin our discussion on chapter 6, a very important chapter, and the focus of the discussion is all about how to gain control of our mind. And to help us give the process of how to gain control of our mind, Lord Shri Krishna here will discuss the process of Ashtang Yoga, the eightfold yoga systems. In the present day, millions of people, yoga is very famous, yoga is in vogue. Millions of people all around the world practice different elements of this Ashtanga Yoga, like Hatha Yoga, which means asanas, and the other aspect is pranayama. In this chapter, the path of Ashtanga Yoga is explained in all details. Lord Shri Krishna will give all the details how to be successful, how to successfully practice this Ashtanga Yoga. And the idea behind Lord Shri Krishna describing in details about Ashtanga Yoga is to just establish its impracticality, that it is impractical for the purpose of self-realization and spiritual perfection. Particularly in this age of distraction, the easiest path of self-realization is Bhakti Yoga. And this is the recommendation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this chapter. So with that as a background, a little bit of information or summary of this chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, where the process of Ashtanga Yoga is detailed, whereas Lord Shri Krishna in the end concludes with Bhakti Yoga to be the topmost yoga practice. Let's get into the subject matter and go into some more details. So to begin with this subject matter, let's take a look at an acronym, as we have been doing it for every chapter to make it easy for us to understand. And the acronym for this chapter is EASY. Interestingly, the acronym is easy, but the process is not easy to control the mind. All right. So it's an interesting contradiction. As we say in English, dichotomy. So let's begin with it, where E stands for enemy or a friend. We all, again, you can use a chat box to say yes or no, because that's the only way we can relate to it. We all have heard an inner voice. We all have experience of it. The devil sitting on one shoulder and the angel sitting on the other, and both are giving their advice to the confused person in between. Yes or no? How many of you agree? You have heard the two different voices within you, like this. So who is this devil and who is this angel taking different roles? It is the voice of the mind. And if the mind is uncontrolled, then that's the devil sitting on your shoulder, giving you very, very dangerous advices. This uncontrolled mind will agitate and misguide the soul within this world, forcing us to succumb to our lower propensities, a nature like lust, anger, greed, envy, and whatnot. Whereas a controlled mind, which acts as an angel, on the other hand, acts as a friend on our spiritual journey, helping us make progressive and healthy and the right choices that can bring us closer to Krishna. So when one controls and befriends the mind, that's the whole idea of the subject matter that Krishna begins in this particular chapter. When one controls the mind becomes his friend, and that is a way of living a peaceful life and a life freed from dualities, a life freed from dualities. Therefore, Lord Shri Krishna in this section of the verses 1 to 9 speaks two very, very important verses. You can mark it as a homework verses. All of you get presentation anyway, so try to learn these two verses. Or maybe let's say do it this way. All of you get presentation anyways. So I'm just quoting very selected verses. So try to learn those verses. It's a good initiative. So Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, verse number 5, Udharat atmanatmanam na atmanam avasadayat atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. Udharat means deliver. One should deliver yourself, one should deliver oneself with the help of the mind. Na atmanam avasadayat. Avasadayat means degrade. One should not degrade through the help of the mind. Rather, with the help of the mind, one should elevate. Atmaiva hi atmano bandhur. The mind can be your friend. Atmaiva ripuratmana. The mind could be your worst of the enemies. So that this mind can become best of your friend when he helps you attain liberation. It helps you live a progressive life. But once the mind degrades you, it becomes your worst enemy. So question comes, how do we control the mind? How do we bring it under control? And that's what Lord Shri Krishna says. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yena atmaivatmanah jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartet atmaiva shatruvat. For him who has conquered the mind, how do we make our mind a friend? Only when you have conquered the mind, mind becomes your friend. Anatmanastu shatrutve. If you fail to control your mind, then your mind becomes your worst or the greatest enemy. So we're going to speak a little bit today from the perspective of psychology on the subject of mind management. And then we'll also look into the discussion of what Lord Shri Krishna speaks about, how to make mind as one's friend and how to save oneself. So let's begin our discussion from the perspective of psychology a little bit. According to psychology, there are two states of mind, and they call it healthy and unhealthy, which Lord Shri Krishna is referring as a friend or an enemy. So where is my mind? I'm asking this question to all of you, and we'll do a quick exercise. And you don't have to answer, but you just have to introspect on it. Let's imagine if I bring a glass which is half filled with water in front of you, how would your mind respond to it? If you have an unhealthy mind, we're speaking in terms of psychology, if you have an unhealthy mind, then that mind will see that glass to be half empty, which means such a mind is prone to complaining, and he has a victim consciousness. Victim consciousness means a person never takes responsibility of one's life, and he always blames others for what for his situation or her situation. That's the state of unhealthy mind. Now, how would a person in a healthy state of mind respond to a glass which is half filled? When a healthy mind sees it, he sees it as a glass half filled with water, which means the person is grateful that at least there is some water in it rather than complaining about it. In other words, very important point, the quality of life is greatly influenced by the quality of our thoughts. To make it one line statement, your thoughts form the world for you. If you carry your thoughts of scarcity, you will be surrounded by scarcity. If you carry thoughts of positivity, you will find yourself in a contented situation. And if you have a negative thoughts, then such a person is always complaining, whining, or comparing. And even the sweetest relationship for such a person will become miserable. And this is the degree of influence of our thinking on the quality of our life. Mind has three functions: thinking, feeling, and willing. And it all starts with thinking, the thoughts, which implies, to extend this discussion, our thoughts, the thoughts that we carry, the thoughts that we have, the thoughts that we cultivate, determines or defines our belief system. Belief system refers to our likings and dislikings. And our belief system determines our lifestyle. Lifestyle refers to our behavior, our response. And the catch, or rather an interesting point to be noted here, is the kind of behavior, the kind of response, the kind of life that we live, it further cultivates thoughts. And that is how it becomes a cycle. So if you want to change your behavior, which means lifestyle, we need to change our belief system. And to change our belief system, we need to fix our thinking. To give you an example of a belief system, in case if you have a wallet with you, take out your wallet, and in wallet, if there is any currency note, take out the currency note. And if you carefully look at the currency note, if you can't do it now, do it later on, take a look at it. If you look at carefully on the currency note, you will see the currency note says that this paper bill belongs to not you. It belongs to Reserve Bank of India. Imagine if Modi today evening decides for a second strike of demonetization, then the currency, that the paper bill with which we are so attached, this is my money, it will be so worthless that you can't even eat chola on top of it. And that's the whole idea of the belief system. To give you another example of how all behavior is belief driven and how belief is created by our thoughts. Let's give you an example of how all behavior is belief driven. Let's go to Srila Prabhupada. 1945, very famous story about Srila Prabhupada. He was cooking in his kitchen. He was frying kachori. And at that point of time, Second World War was about to come to an end, and Japan had attacked Calcutta. And the Air Force of Japan Army was dropping bomb on the city of Calcutta. Srila Prabhupada was undisturbed, unperturbed. He was in the kitchen frying kachoris for his deities. And there was a whole blackout was declared, there was a siren going on, and everyone was supposed to take shelter, was supposed to close down the house, close down the windows, switch off the lights, everything. So Prabhupada was busy frying his kachori, and his neighbor saw, and his neighbor was running to the shelter home to take shelter, the bomb shelters that were created. And Prabhupada's neighbor, Prabhupada's Abhay Charan Day, and Prabhupada's neighbor saw that Prabhupada is busy cooking in the kitchen. He said, Swami, he is not Swami. He says, Abhay Charan, what are you doing? Don't you hear to the siren? The Japanese Air Force is dropping a bomb. Run, save yourself. What are you doing in the kitchen? And Srila Prabhupada turned around very coolly and he said, my dear friend, if Krishna wants to kill someone, then nobody can protect him. And if Krishna wants to protect someone, then nobody can kill him. Do you see the connection now? All behavior is belief driven, and that's the whole point about it. So if you want to change your behavior or lifestyle, we need to change our belief system. And to change our belief system, we need to change our thoughts. Now, thoughts are formed or are created by the association we keep. And whatever I'm speaking right now is what we'll see when Lord Shri Krishna begins to offer a solution in Bhagavad Gita. We'll come to that. So thoughts are created by the association that we keep. And association is of two kinds. Generally, when we hear the word association, we think association of a person. Correct. But there is one more thing to it. Association of a person and association of information. And in today's day and time of age of information, we have a far greater impact on our consciousness because of the information rather than that of a person. To give you an example, imagine somebody is addicted to watching news, breaking news, 24/7. Anytime you switch on the news channel, it's always breaking news. When I was growing up, once in a day, there would be a breaking news for 10 minutes. 15 years later on, you have a breaking news 24/7. Yes or no? In case if you have seen news. So imagine somebody is addicted to watching news. That person would be prone to negative thoughts. His behavior would be quarrelsome and he would be agitated. Why? Because news is all about dividing people. Similarly, somebody is too addicted to watching movies, cinema, and whatnot. And in movies, all this cinema, media, what it's shown, it's not about the real life. It's all about unreal stories. And many of the movies are about superheroes. And one of the famous superheroes of India is Rajinikanth. Imagine somebody have grown up watching the movies of Rajnikant. Disclaimer, I have nothing against Rajnikant. I'm just giving an example, okay? Imagine somebody have grown up watching the movies of Rajnikant. In any of his movie, you will see him, let's say he's driving a truck. He comes down from the truck. He puts a cigarette in his mouth, takes a puff, and there are 12 enemies standing in front of Rajnikant. And there's going to be a fight between a hero and a villain. What our superhero Rajnikant will do? He'll take a puff of a cigarette, throw a cigarette right up in the sky, immediately go and fight with the 12 men, beat them, come back to the same spot, and he'll put his head up and the cigarette will fall in his mouth. Now, do you know that very well? This is highly unrealistic. Imagine that the person grows up seeing things like this. When he comes out to live in a real world, he finds real world very difficult to live. And similar effect happens in our consciousness when we read books of fiction and whatnot, which is all filled with politics, crime, extramarital affairs, and all that. So that is a severe impact of informational association that we have. And similarly is the impact of association of a person. Just like a bad association can harm us, similarly the good association can transform us. Example, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada went to West, gave his association to hippies, and turned those drug addicts, hippies, into happies. And they all gave up all their sinful activities. And the result was, and the cause was the association of Srila Prabhupada. That's the reason. To sum up this discussion, it is said, change your thoughts, change your world. So the process of the mind control begins with two things. Change your association. And what is that association? Replace the association of information that you have, change your information with the information or with the wisdom literatures. If somebody regularly reads wisdom literatures like Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Srimad Bhagavatam, and religious scriptures of other faith, I can promise you, you will definitely find a role model for yourself for courage, chastity, purity, truthfulness, and whatnot. And if you regularly associate with such literatures and such role models, we will definitely imbibe those qualities, because thoughts determines our belief system and belief system creates our behavior. That's how the personality is formed. Similarly, we seek out a saintly association. I gave an example of Srila Prabhupada. If we seek out a saintly association, our mind would get trained accordingly. And that's how we cultivate good thoughts. And rest of the thing is found accordingly. So in essence, Krishna says, make your mind a friend. The mind, if it is controlled, becomes best of the friend. So where we need to begin is to make these two changes. Again, think about the association. What association of information we have and what association of people we have. I'll conclude this. We go to the next point. In essence, it is said, if you want to find out about any person, it is said, find out the 5 people he regularly associates with. Because anyone is an average of the 5 people he regularly associates with. And that's the power of association. So to quickly sum up this discussion about friend or enemy, Lord Shri Krishna sums up this discussion as follows. If a mind is controlled, the mind acts as a friend. If uncontrolled, mind acts as an enemy. Controlled mind means mind follows the dictation of Guru and Gauranga, Guru, Sadhu, and scriptures. Whereas uncontrolled mind follows the dictation of 6 enemies, that is Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mad, Matsarya. Controlled mind acts for the satisfaction of the Lord, whereas the uncontrolled mind pursues sense gratification. Uncontrolled mind paves our way for the liberation from this material existence, whereas the uncontrolled mind entangles us through our fruitive activities which we perform. So mind is the root cause. If we can fix the mind, if we can train the mind properly or control the mind, as Lord Shri Krishna brings out in this chapter 6, then we can be successful in the path of spirituality. So to conclude and move forward to the second part of the discussion, here's a question for all of you, just to know if the subject matter was clear. How to train our mind to make it as our friend? What would you do? Follow its dictation? That is, my mind is already my well-wisher. Follow dictations of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastras rather than of the mind. Follow advice of your friend or atheist friend or a relative. Or maybe watch primetime news and the recent movies to train the mind and to acquire knowledge. What would you do to train your mind? In essence, uncontrolled mind, as we said before, will agitate and misguide us. The controlled mind will pave us a way to live a peaceful and a happy life and a God conscious life. So, this brings us to the second section of this particular chapter, where we'll now look into what Bhagavad Gita, what Lord Shri Krishna speaks about controlling the mind. God Prabhu, you can manage this poll. When it is done, you can publish the result. So Lord Shri Krishna here first speaks about the process of Ashtang Yoga. Okay, so 98% people think, they agree, if you want to control the mind, we should follow the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and scriptures. Thank you. So here Lord Shri Krishna first begins to speak about the process called as Ashtanga Yoga. We are now getting into Bhagavad Gita discussion, what Krishna speaks on controlling the mind. So one way to control the mind is through the process of Ashtanga Yoga. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. However, it's not an easy process. Lord Shri Krishna goes in details of Ashtanga Yoga process in this section where he tells, if somebody wants to practice Ashtanga Yoga, what it involves? Very first thing, it involves living in seclusion. You cannot say that I'm going to live in seclusion in my house. No, that is not seclusion. What seclusion means for the practitioner of Ashtanga Yoga is to live all alone in the forest. You cannot lock yourself in a room in your house and say, I'm in seclusion practicing Hatha Yoga, Pranayama. No, that's not the thing. Second, practicing celibacy. To somebody to perform Ashtanga Yoga, he has to take sannyas. Grahastha, congregation cannot practice Ashtanga Yoga, not allowed. And then you have to follow very strict regulations of eating, sleeping. You have to sit in a very particular posture and sit for a long, long time. And then you have to focus your mind or the consciousness on the supreme soul within. So this path is exclusively for renunciates, which means most of you, I believe, as a congregation or maybe the youth, probably going to get married. Most of you would not even be allowed to practice as Ashtanga Yoga. On top of it, it's very austere. In Krishna consciousness, you can eat nice sweet pineapple, halwa, jalebi, whatnot. In Ashtanga Yoga, you're allowed to breathe and breathe oxygen, fresh oxygen in the forest. You can do breathe in and breathe out. That is what you can do. But you're not allowed to engage in any kind of sense pleasure for that reason. So that's the reason this process of Ashtanga Yoga becomes very difficult. So here is my question to all of you. How many of you would prefer an alternative to Ashtanga Yoga, which is more easier and possible for current age? Right now, Lord Shri Krishna is saying Ashtanga Yoga, and he's speaking about how to control the mind through the process of Ashtanga Yoga. But how many of you would want to have something which is more simpler, which is more doable? What Krishna is speaking, how many of you feel is impossible for me to do? Okay, God Prabhu, again, you manage it. I'll continue the discussion. I'll tell you what Arjuna thinks about it. When Arjuna heard this, you know what? How Arjuna responded to this? Let's see what Arjuna said. And this is what Arjuna said. Arjuna said, my dear Lord, this is mission impossible. Nobody can follow Ashtanga Yoga process. This is impossible. This is Arjuna saying in Dwapar Yoga, by the way, okay? I'll be interested to see the result now. I want to see how many of you say, no, you're fine to follow Ashtanga Yoga. So 3 people said they don't need easier process. They're fine with Ashtanga Yoga. All the best to you. Arjuna thinks other way around. Well, and some says not sure, but 87% people say they want easy process. So welcome, because we're going to speak about the easy process which Krishna is going to offer now. So let's see what Arjuna said. Arjuna said, my dear Lord, the system of yoga that you're prescribed or that you've summarized here, it is impractical. Unendurable means impossible. Why? Because the mind is restless and unsteady. And then he speaks a very classic verse which describes the nature of mind in Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, verse number 34. Chanchalam hi manaha Krishna pramati ballavadradam Tasyam nigraham manye vayuriva sudishkramam. So let's do the analysis of this verse where he says the mind is restless, turbulent, and obstinate. Very, very difficult to control. I can control the wind, not an ordinary wind. I can control the windstorm, but controlling the mind, agitated mind, is very difficult. So, what is the nature of mind, which Arjuna explains? First, flickering. Flickering means sankalpa and vikalpa, always changing position. Today he says you do this, tomorrow he says no, this is not the best thing, I should do something else. How many of you experience this sankalpa vikalpa? Yes, no, I should not do it. And the next time, oh yes, I should do it. We keep on changing our position, what we wish to do, we don't know, and we are always confused. And the classic example in Bhagavad Gita is Arjuna himself. Arjuna brought Krishna on the battlefield to be his charioteer, to fight in the war, so that Arjuna can fight. And after bringing Krishna into the battlefield, Arjuna says, my dear Lord, I don't want to fight. This is called as sankalpa and vikalpa. If you have experienced this, you may reply yes or no, if you relate to it, and that's the whole point. Nature of the mind. Second thing he says is very strong, obstinate. Once the mind makes a determination, for example, if once you have made your mind to eat gulab jamun, then a person is willing to travel a distance even to get the gulab jamun. Let me do a quick poll here. I have a question for all of you here. And here it is. How many of you agree once your mind decides if he wants to have something, he wants to watch a movie, he wants to watch some cricket match, wants to eat something, then it becomes very difficult not to do it. You become totally restless. And you're willing to travel a distance even to fulfill the desire. So that's what Arjuna is saying. It is very, very difficult. The mind is very obstinate and strong. Once it makes its choice, once it gets attached to sense object, it's very difficult to change it. And the third, Arjuna explains, is turbulent. What does turbulent mean here? Uncontrolled mind is very ruthless, which means it can make a person act in a most selfish, egoistic, and ungrateful ways. And after a while, then a person thinks, why did I act like this? Why did I behave like this? Therefore, Arjuna says, my dear Lord, it is easier to control hurricane, but to control this mind is very, very difficult. So yeah, most of you have an experience. I'm just looking at your poll results. Most of you have an experience. It's very difficult to control the mind once it decides on something. So how do we control? What does Krishna offers? What is the Krishna's solution here? Krishna speaks about it in the next verse, 35th verse, where Krishna says, practice makes it possible. And Lord Shri Krishna says, Asamshayam mahabhav manodurnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagena cha grihate. Yes, Arjuna, I agree. The mind is very difficult to control. Mahabhavo Arjuna, Krishna is addressing Arjuna as Mahabhavo, means a great powerful warrior. To affirm him, to confirm is Arjuna, what you're thinking is correct. What you're telling is correct. And then Krishna says how to control? Abhyas and Vairagya. Two-step process. By practice, Abhyasa and Vairagya. What is this practice and what is this Vairagya means? The two-step process that Lord Shri Krishna gives. And you can relate it to what we have already discussed when we were describing the psychology of healthy and unhealthy mind. So practice means do's, to follow. And what we need to follow? The foremost is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And along with that, the 9 process, Navavida Bhakti jisko kaha jata hai, this is Shavanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. In other words, in essence, what to do? Once again, right association. Read wisdom literatures. Hear about spiritual life. Hear of Krishna Katha. Chant the holy names of the Lord. And it is all possible when you have a saintly association. Because in saintly association, we'll be forced to remember Krishna. That is abhyasena. So that is what we need to do individually in our life. Wherever we are, we need to bring into our practice, where we practice spiritual culture. Detachment, vairagena, which refers to don't, which means to give up. Abhyasa, to accept, and detachment, to give up, vairagena, in other words. So what we have to give up? We have to give up all those engagements which distract our mind from Krishna. Again, coming back to the point that we discussed before, association. I spoke about people and information. So be careful of what information you're listening to or spending time with. If it is distracting your mind, troubling your mind, filling your mind with all kind of desires and anger and agitation, that's not helpful for you to focus or remember Krishna. Similarly, you have to be conscious of the association of people. If we take association of people like Duryodhan took of Shakuni, and Shakuni had come to Hastinapur with a single aim to destroy Kuru dynasty, and he was able to do it through Duryodhan. Duryodhan had the association available of Yudhishthira Maharaj, Bhishma Pitama, Vidura, Lord Shri Krishna, in fact himself, and Vyasdev. Duryodhan didn't took any of those association. He took Shakuni's association, and see what happened at the end of it. So that's the whole point of it. So when Arjuna heard this, he began to think, my dear Lord, what you say, I totally agree. But the point is, controlling mind is not easy. So my point or my question here is, because Arjuna is a little scared because he understands controlling mind requires a lot of effort, determination. Thus Arjuna began to think, my dear Lord, what happens if one faithfully takes to this yogic process that you have prescribed, but later falls away without perfecting his spiritual consciousness? What happens to him? In other words, such a person who began the life of a yogi, but somehow he got distracted and left. Would he be left in a no man's land? No man's land means he had failed to attain perfection in spiritual life, and similarly, he has already squandered his opportunity for worldly pleasures. And this brings us to the third section of the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Easy, the third section, S, stands for success or failure, wherein Arjuna in verse number 37 and 38 asks the following questions to Lord Shri Krishna. Arjuna said, my dear Lord, what is the destination of unsuccessful yogi who took the process with all sincerity, but due to some worldly mindedness, he got distracted and could not attain perfection in mysticism? Does he fall away from both spiritual and material success? And that's the question of Arjuna. So before we look into it, what Lord Shri Krishna responds here, let's look into it, why Arjuna asked this question at the first place. Why Arjuna is asking such a question. Why am I saying this point? Because Lord Shri Krishna in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, he already announced, Neha vikramana shusti prattavayo na vidyate swalpamasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Second chapter, 40th verse, Krishna says, even one, if somebody, even for a minuscule time, practice bhakti yoga, trayate mahato bhayat, he could be saved from his most dangerous situation. In other words, such a person has nothing to regret. He's going back. He's on the right track of success. Even if he gets distracted, there is no harm. But why did Arjuna is asking here? Arjuna wants to be reassured because one may sincerely accept the process, but may fail for several reasons. So in other words, he's asking for all of us, if in case we are frightened to understand we have to control the mind, then Arjuna wants us to be reassured that there is no loss. Particularly because Krishna have explained the path of Jnana Yoga in previous chapters, and in this chapter of Ashtang Yoga, which is already established by Lord Shri Krishna, is very, very difficult. But if somebody takes to Bhakti Yoga, there are chances that he may still leave the path of Bhakti Yoga, which is the prescribed process that Krishna says. Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga is one and same in that sense. So why somebody could leave Bhakti Yoga? There are two cases. One, someone may not be sufficiently serious about following the process. He's just trying out and experimenting. And as a teacher or as a preacher, because we've been doing this for years together, we come across so many people. We see how people come, get connected, try out, and then they just disappear. So person himself was not serious towards the process. Second, maybe sometime the people get deviated from the path despite being sincere. So there is a possibility of that. Maybe they make some wrong decision in life, or maybe their faith gets shaken up for whatever reasons. So here in this section, Lord Shri Krishna will appease all such fears of Arjuna and also of us by explaining that whoever takes up this genuine spiritual process is eternally benefited even if they don't perfect it. And for that, Lord Shri Krishna speaks about it in verse number 40 to verse number 45, where Krishna explains, even if you don't complete it in one lifetime, whatever success we have accomplished in this lifetime in the path of spirituality, in the next life, Krishna promises, we will continue from that place only, or from that point only. Thus, whoever has started a spiritual life, it does not matter. His success is guaranteed. What differs is one lifetime or many lifetimes. That depends on an individual. And we have many cases which are given in scriptures. One is of Bharat Maharaj. Because of something, because of his attachment to a deer, he got distracted from his spiritual life. Next life, he became a deer, but he remembered everything about his previous life, the Krishna consciousness. And he always spent his time in the association of sadhus, and he gave up his body. And in the next and the last life, he took a birth of a son of a Brahmana and became a great Jada Bharat. So here, Lord Shri Krishna says, if somebody falls away from the process of Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness after a short practice, such a person is guaranteed to go to higher planets like Indraloka, Swargaloka. He will take a birth in he will take a birth there and enjoy, reap the results of his spiritual practice, or else he will take a birth in an aristocratic family where he will be given an opportunity to continue from where he left in his previous life. And what happens to those who have performed for a long time and then they get distracted? Krishna says such a person takes birth in a family of devotees. That's the reason Srila Prabhupada told to his disciples, those who were married and those who begot kids later on. Prabhupada said, do not ever chastise your kids. Do not take them lightly because you are a devotee of the Lord. The kids born to you could be or would be or might be great yogis in their previous life for some reason who could not fulfill their goal of Krishna consciousness and have come in this last life to accomplish it. So be always careful. So that's what Lord Shri Krishna says here. So finally, Lord Shri Krishna reassuring Arjuna that there is no loss in spiritual life, is only gain. Lord Shri Krishna concludes this discussion with the affirmation where he tells to Arjuna, hey Arjuna, in any situation and every situation, be a yogi. The perfection and the goal of all yoga system is to help the individual become fully conscious of God at all times. And that is what it means to be a yogi. In other words, who is a yogi? A yogi is a person whose life and activities are oriented towards re-establishing his lost, forgotten relationship with the Lord. This is what yoga is, and this is what yogi is. Now, we have already discussed the yoga ladder. There are different ways of establishing, like karma yoga, jnana yoga. Dhyana yoga refers to Ashtang yoga and Bhakti yoga. So you may have a question, if there are different ways, so which is the best? In karma yoga, we engage our senses by working. In jnana yoga is a function of mind. Dhyana yoga is a function of meditation, which means intelligence. And Bhakti yoga, we engage everything. Prana, artha, diya, vacha. With everything, we engage in the service of the Lord. So if we have so many options, which is the best? Bhakti yoga is best? Or really, who says it? How can we say Bhakti yoga is best? So who can tell us what is the best process of yoga? Well, it's a simple question. If you want to find out which version of the Microsoft Windows is the best, who can tell this? Of course, the author of Windows, Bill Gates, right? He's the best person. Similarly, it is Lord Shri Krishna who gave us the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna revealed the knowledge about different yoga process. Of course, Krishna only can tell us what is the best yoga. And that's what Krishna says in the last verse of the chapter 6, with which the first section of Bhagavad Gita concludes. As I said before, Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 parts. So today we are concluding the first part. And Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantaratmanah Shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatamo mataha. In other words, Lord Shri Krishna says, a person who is always engaged in remembering me, Shraddhavan bhajate yo mam, with faith renders devotional service and remembers me, Same yuktatamo mataha. Among all the yogis, I consider him to be the best. And not only that, in fact, the Bhakti Yoga is the easiest, most efficient process described or prescribed for Kali Yoga. So, a little bit elaborate on what is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga refers to the connection of soul with Lord, which means a yoga which establishes our soul's love and service for Krishna is called Bhakti Yoga. So, how do we practice Bhakti Yoga? In this age, the primary practice of Bhakti Yoga is mantra meditation, and that is chanting the name of God. All of you, along with me, please recite Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And it is explained in scriptures that through this process, simple process of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the mantra meditation, any person from any background can attain spiritual perfection and experience all the benefits described in this chapter and elsewhere. It doesn't matter what we have done in the past. What matters is what we do today. And if we take to this easy process of Bhakti Yoga, which means the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, then each one of us, either be a housewife, or a granny, or a grandfather, or a small child, or an IT employee, or a working man, or a brahmachari, all of us equally have an equal opportunity to attain perfection. So I know some of you might have a question. Can I practice Bhakti Yoga in my family life? Because Ashtang Yoga, you had to renounce, go to the forest. Can we do this in family life, what Krishna is prescribing here? Well, Lord Shri Krishna prescribed this to Arjuna. And Arjuna was not a sannyasi. And Arjuna did not take sannyas after listening to Bhagavad Gita. He was rather a king. Of course, he was a younger brother of a king. In that sense, he was a king. He was a family man. And Lord Shri Krishna spoke this message to Arjuna. So yes, we all can practice it. We all means, I'm referring to the congregation. Yes, being a family person, you can very well practice it. Then question arises, that's all right, Prabhu. यहाँ तो मरने का भी time नहीं है. I have no time. I'm so busy. How do I take out time? Our time is wasted. Our not time is wasted. Our time precisely goes into 3 activities. Tell me if you agree with this or not. One is the work time, when you all perform your duties. Second is the worry time. Mera kya hoga? Bhavishya ka kya hoga? And third is the waste time, which refers to spending time on Facebook, Instagram, or maybe the news channel or the movies. You can determine for yourself, but these are something. Do you agree with this or not? More or less precisely our time goes in these 3 activities. Well, if you agree, then understand and ask yourself, are you more busy than Arjuna? He was a king. He was the younger brother of a king. What a great responsibility. So what you and I can do, or what you all can do, is use some of your worry time and the waste time. Identify it and take out some of the time from this worry and the waste time zone and use it for practicing Bhakti Yoga. And the foremost of that is chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. I can promise you, if you do so, you will experience an incredible transformation in yourself. and more amazed would be your family members around you. So somebody may say, Prabhuji, we have heard from our parents, spirituality is a retirement program. My parents used to tell me, or my parents tell me, beta abhi to tere age hai enjoy karne ki. Jab booda ho jayega tab karna. Well, life is a preparation. We should always remember this. Prahlad Maharaj, he was a 5-year-old boy. He was teaching to everyone to take to Krishna consciousness. So spirituality is not a retirement program. Spirituality is an essential is an essential commodity to be added in our life today. And that's how we begin our Bhagavad Gita, where I said Bhagavad Gita trains us to deal with calamities. And the biggest and the foremost calamities is a death and many other things that anyway is going to come in our life. But the point is, death doesn't come by knocking on your door or by taking your appointment. Should spirituality be given importance? Yes, it should be. One of the medical toppers in Bombay University was connected to his ISKCON, was regularly attending programs. But before his final year exam, 6 months before, he stopped coming, saying that I have to study for my exams. When it is finished, I'll come. Exams got finished. Then he said, I'm so much in anxiety for my results. Let my results come. When results come, I'll definitely come. His results came. He was a topper. And then the devotee again went and told him, my dear brother, you have not practiced Krishna consciousness. You have not chanted for the last 6 months. Why don't you come? There's a big program in temple. He says, sir, or devotee, my dear Prabhu, today, because on the occasion of me being the topper, my friends have hosted a party. Let me attend that party today evening. Tomorrow, I'll definitely come. It's a true story. This boy went to that party and he got a heart attack and he died. That was the end of it. So should spirituality be given importance? Yes, very much, because we don't know. We may not be as lucky as Parikshit Maharaj, who had a 7-day notice. And in case if we miss out this human life, we are really not sure where we're going to end up in the next life. There are a lot of options we may get. There are 8.4 million species, which means 8 million species are there which are non-human. So to conclude the last part of our discussion, I'll just take 5 minutes to sum up this discussion. What should I do now? Well, if that's what you're asking, how can I practice, how can I start this whole Krishna consciousness? How do I make the teachings of Bhagavad Gita practical in my life? There are 4 steps that we need to do. The very first thing, recognize our situation in this world. And the very first thing is, each one of us who are born into this material world, we all are sick and we all need help. Now, why am I referring to sick? I'm not talking the COVID virus here. So what am I talking about? We all have this virus of material sickness. Bhava Sagar, Bhava Moha jisko kaha jata hai. And what are the symptoms of this disease which all of us have? We all suffer from these 4 things: birth, death, old age, and disease. This is not a glory. This is a sickness. It's a painful experience. And not only this, scriptures describe 3 kinds of kleshas, which is Adi Atmika, Adi Bhautika, and Adi Daivika. Please tell me yes or no if you agree or not. Do you all have an experience of anxieties, stress because of your mind? Do you have an experience of suffering because of a pain in the body? Have you ever been bitten by a mosquito? That is Adi Bhautika. Adi Atmika I already described. Do you feel joy when there is a good weather? And do you feel sorrow when it is too hot and too cold? That is Adi Daivika Klesha. Who is here can tell us that does not undergo these kleshas? If we all have experienced these kleshas, these are the symptoms of our sickness. So if we all are sick, so what we are supposed to do? We have to approach the right doctor. That's the second step. And what is the right doctor? Not in every person who wears a uniform of a doctor and puts on a stethoscope becomes a doctor. He could very well be a first-year MBBS student. And if you go and ask him for a surgery, you're inviting a death. A doctor has to be authorized by the university. That's the point. Which means, as we have described before in the 4th chapter, about the disciplic succession. The guru has to be from a bona fide parampara. Just like we belong to Brahma Madhava Gaudiya parampara, and Srila Prabhupada is an acharya and also disciple in this parampara. So that's how Srila Prabhupada and his disciples become bona fide when they follow the teachings, what Prabhupada taught us, which was taught to Prabhupada by his teacher, and this is how the parampara system is formed. Then let's come to the third point. What are we supposed to do next after we have found a guru? Then we have to avoid negative things. What are the negative things that scripture says? The four things that we need to give up. One is meat eating. I'm not going to go into details of it right now. We'll go into details later on. But meat eating is very sinful. Second, gambling. Because of this gambling, the mind becomes very, very agitated. And as a result, a person loses his truthfulness. Actually, these four things breaks the four pillars of dharma. The meat eating breaks the first pillar of dharma, that is mercy. Gambling breaks the pillar of truthfulness, which is the second pillar of dharma. Third, negative thing that we should avoid is intoxication, which means drinking liquor and all that. If somebody does it, then the third principle of austerity of dharma is destroyed. And the fourth refers to illicit relationship, because of which the fourth pillar of dharma, that is cleanliness, is destroyed. And if dharma is destroyed, then how could we ever be peaceful? We can never ever progress in spiritual life, because this is vikarma, this is sinful activities. And because of sinful activities, we would be punished. Our mind will become more disturbed and agitated. And finally, we have to accept the positive things. So what is that positive treatment that we all have to accept? So you don't have to wait for anything right now. You have found the right guru or not, that's not the subject matter. You can give up the negative things immediately or not, that's not the subject matter. What you can do right now, take to the positive thing. Do the positive thing, everything else will fall in its place. So what are this positive thing? We have discussed before also. That is the ABCD formula. Because we are concluding the first 6 chapters, so I just wanted to sum it up here. Association of saintly people. Second, wisdom literatures like Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Srimad Bhagavatam. You remember association of information, as I said in the beginning? Third, C for chanting. Chanting, this is what the central theme of Bhakti Yoga. And that's what scripture speaks about it. And there are examples in scriptures, like we know of Ratnakar, how he chanted the holy names of the Lord and became a great personality. And similarly, the hippies that Srila Prabhupada met. So all of us should take to this process of chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra in our life. And Kali Santarana Upanishad says, Iti Shodashkam Namanam Kali Kalmashanashanam Nataha Paratarapaya Sarvavedeshu Drishyate. After searching through the whole Vedic literature, one cannot find a method of religion as simple as the chanting of the holy names of the Lord for this day and time. And finally, the diet. The first part of the diet is vegetarian, and then Krishna Prasadam. If we can accept these 4 things, A, B, C, D in our life, my request to all of you, just focus on these 4 positive things in your life. Everything else will fall on its place. So in case if you don't chant, if you have not yet started chanting, it'll be my humble request to you, please, to move forward in our life, we always have to make some determination. Make a determination and take a vow of chanting, let's say 1 round every day, or let's say 2 rounds. If you're chanting 4 rounds, let's make an attempt to chant 6 rounds to increase our practice, our sincerity. That way we'll be able to control our mind. And with that, we come to the conclusion of chapter 6, where the acronym for this chapter was easy. Although the acronym is easy, but what is described about controlling the mind is not easy. And the sum and substance of this chapter is, if you want to live a happy life, if you want to attain success in your life, it's very, very important to control the mind. And how do we control the mind? Krishna prescribed Ashtang Yoga. However, Arjuna rejected it. Then Krishna said, yes, Arjuna, Ashtang Yoga is not possible. Do the Abhyasa and Vairagya, which means the do's and don'ts of Bhakti Yoga. And ultimately, Lord Krishna says, Bhakti Yoga is the easiest. And those who practice Bhakti Yoga are very, very dear to me among all the process. Like that. Yoginam api sarvesham mad gatina antaratmana. Like that. And what happens to those who fail in this path? Krishna says those who fail after practicing it for a short while, they either go to heaven or they take birth in the very rich families. Whereas those who get distracted after practicing for a long time, they take birth in a family of devotees. The essence is on the path of spiritual life, there is no loss, there is only victory. Only question is of time when person will attain perfection. So there is nothing to fear or worry about. With that, I thank you all for your kind attention, joining us for this Bhagavad Gita program. Today we concluded our chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. And next week when we'll meet on Saturday, we'll have a review of all the first 6 chapters, as I had announced before. And then on the Sunday, we'll begin the second theme or the second section of Bhagavad Gita, that is Bhakti Yoga. So coming Saturday, we'll do the recap of all the first 6 chapters, and Sunday we'll have chapter 7. With that, thank you all for joining us today evening and taking out your time. And really happy to see many of you coming every weekend. That shows your sincerity, and that inspires me to make sure that I'm available. I come on time and we have a program. So thank you. Hare Krishna, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaurav Prabhu, back to you. And before we
Thank you.
close, if you all are comfortable, I would really appreciate if I can see who all were there for the session. So at least I get to know who all are connected to this forum. If you all can switch on your cameras that way. Gaurav Prabhu, back to you.
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for the class. I have few queries on the chat box. So maybe I'll start with the first one. The first query is from Tarun Prabhu. His question is, what is the meaning of conquering mind?
Oh, what is the meaning of mind? In other words, to not give in to the lower propensities, to not act in a way because of which we break any of the pillars of dharma. Controlling mind means we are able to follow the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastras. We stay focused on the goal of life. That is what conquering the mind means. Our mind, by default, is conditioned because of all of our previous lives' conditionings to act sinfully. As I said, there is some, the sound voice of a demon, the voice of an angel, and we all have that experience. Sometimes our mind acts as an angel, sometimes it acts as a demon. And then I had described to you the state of unhealthy mind and a healthy mind. And I asked you a question, find out where is your mind? Is it in a healthy zone or unhealthy zone? So when we control the mind, then our mind comes in a healthy zone. That's the whole idea. And it's a practice, abhyasena tu kaunteya. So Tarun, it is not because you heard this today, tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're a self-realized person. It doesn't happen overnight, okay? It's a practice. You have to attempt it. You have to show your sincerity. And then Lord Shri Krishna awards us with the ability where the mind becomes subordinate. All right, Tarun, if you're there, I don't know if you're there, you can just say yes or no. Now you can give them a right to unmute, so I can at least know if the person was he got the answer or not. You unmuted yours.
They have the right.
Okay.
Yeah, they have the right. Yes.
All right. So I'm not sure if Tarun is there or not anymore. Okay, Gaurav, we'll go ahead next. Gaurav, you're muted. What are you doing?
Sorry, Prabhu. Next question is from Vinayak Prabhu. I'm not sure whether that question is still is there or he got the answer. He's asking, what is mind?
Actually, yeah. I have the same question. I just want to know how the mind and the soul are connected, because mind comes under one of the energies of the Lord out of the 8, that is Bhumi and all these things. And how the mind and soul are connected. And just I want to know that, because we desire. So soul has a desires. How does desires has been
Yeah,
transferred to the mind?
I'll give you a simple analogy to help you understand that. Soul desires, and the body fulfills their desires. So the medium of communication between the soul, which is spiritual, and the body, which is gross. So how does the spirit connect with the matter? There comes the mind, the subtle body. So mind is like a bridge which allows the transmission, or which allows the traffic from one end to another end. Now, if your mind is corrupted, then whatever information is coming from the soul would end up becoming corrupted, yes or no? Let me give you a very simple example. Imagine you have your smartphone, let's say a computer, and your computer is like your body, and the software of your computer is like mind, right? And you are a soul. You interact, you type in, and the software translates that, and and tells it to the operating system or the hardware to act in a certain manner, right? That's the whole point of a software. Let's say you're using Microsoft Word and you're typing in your name, but if your software is corrupted, because your software is corrupted, you want to have some particular output, but because software is corrupted, it will give you some other output. Understood? So that's the reason what's happening with all of us. All of us here, without a doubt, it's not a question to ask. All of us want to be happy. Who wants to be miserable? But look, because of the state of our mind, we end up in a miserable state. It is all because of an unhealthy state of mind. All of us want to be happy. All of us want to live peaceful life. But because the mind is corrupted, it creates an output of suffering. It creates an output of complaint, finding faults, negativity. And like that, the individual suffers. So that's how the soul and the mind are connected. You can find more details about it. There is a whole series of discussion that we do on the mind management course. You will understand the whole concept. It's a big subject matter.
So it's just like a garbage bag in which whatever you have done in the previous things are getting stored, and whatever now the input thing is given is going to the garbage bag to the body. So whatever we have done in my previous lives and all these things, it got stored in my mind. And
so mind is a cluster of desires and also of past experiences. Mind is different than the brain. Mind is a cluster of thoughts, desires, and experiences. And they're not only of this lifetime, they're of previous lifetimes. Because when you die, the mind continues on. So life after life of a subtle body continues on. So our mind is a combination of so many millions of lifetimes.
and what
That's the reason to train the mind becomes a challenge.
about intelligence, Prabhu? Mind is there. Mind is a thing.
And intelligence is superior to mind. And intelligence is supposed to dictate the mind. But for intelligence to be able to dictate the mind, intelligence has to be trained up or empowered through proper knowledge. That's what cultivation of knowledge Krishna speaks about. When you do proper hearing about the science of spirituality, like scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, and so forth, then your intelligence becomes stronger. When intelligence becomes stronger, then you can subdue your mind. By default, those who are not trained up in this aspect of knowledge, their intelligence is by default sold out to the mind. Because intelligence is also heavily conditioned to act for sense gratification. So the process of hearing purifies your intelligence, process of chanting purifies your mind, and the process of engaging oneself physically in the service, like cleaning the temple, cooking in the kitchen and whatnot for the Lord, purifies our senses. That's how these different aspects purifies senses, mind, and intelligence. For mind, we were speaking about it in this chapter, so we said chant again and again. And the third and fourth chapter, we were talking about, purifying the intelligence. So cultivate intelligence was described. Okay. It's a subject matter. You'll have to think more on it. We can discuss, or else you can watch this mind management video we have, which will give you more details on it. Prabhu, next.
Yeah. Yeah, Prabhu. Next question is from Anupa Mataji. She's asking, what are the 9 processes of bhakti?
So that's Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. So Shravanam means hearing, Kirtanam means chanting. Chanting what? Vishnu. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, chanting the names of the Lord. Smaranam is to remember the Lord. Pada Sevanam is to serve the Lord. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. Archanam is to offer worship. Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam. Vandanam is to offer prayer. Dasyam is to be in the mood of a servant of the Lord. To serve, understand who am I in relation to Lord. Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. 8th is Sakhyam, in the mood of a friend, to understand, to love the Lord, that He is my dearmost friend. So that is Sakhyam. Atma Nivedam, to surrender, with everything to the Lord. Atma Nivedanam, to surrender everything to the Lord, just like the gopis did in Vrindavan Leela. So these are the 9 processes. So you don't have to do all the 9. Just do any one nicely and will attain perfection in spiritual life. Shravanam, Kirtanam are interrelated. So focus on Shravanam, Kirtanam. Because when these things become strong, then you'll be able to do Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanvedam, everything else properly. All right.
Yes, Prabhu. Next is Upma Mataji. She's asking how to control anger and how to avoid provoking situation or words by your family members.
So let's address the first question, because situations are not in your control. So you're saying how to avoid provoking situations. Situation comes as a part of our karmic reactions. So you cannot change that. That's the result of our past actions. So what happens to us around us? So situation is going to happen. So you cannot change the situation. Now, what you can change is your response to that. And that is the message of Bhagavad Gita. So when you train yourself, when you cultivate the spiritual life, then you get empowered to act properly. So हम आगे जाकर बात करेंगे गुणा की, सत्वगुण, रजगुण and तमोगुण. So the process of chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, eating Krishna Prasadam, this all cultivates Sattva-guna. When you're in Sattva-guna, and if you are put into a challenging situation, then you respond very thoughtfully, thinking about the pros and cons of it. However, when a person is in mode of passion, if he's in mode of passion, he responds very angrily, short-tempered. It's a very immediate response. And if he's in ignorance, he just does not care. He does not care for one's well-being. He does not care for the other's well-being. That is tamoguna response. So we respond according to the modes which are dominating us. So what we need to do is to change the modes. And how to change the modes? That's the ABCD thing. Keep association of saintly people, read wisdom literature, chant the holy names of the Lord. Then Sattva Guna will develop. Then your responses will change. Gaurav Prabhu?
Prabhu, next question is from Kirtana Mataji. She's asking, will I be able to practice Bhakti Yoga in the time I get between any work? In that time, will it be sufficient?
You can start with that. Nothing is sufficient in terms of spiritual life. Once you begin to find a joy in spiritual life, then you'll like to do it all through the day, all through the night. So if in case that's what you can do with, when you get time between your job, fantastic. Start with it. That's a wonderful thing. What we need right now is to start. Initiate the process. And then slowly, everything would fall on its own place.
Yeah, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Next question is from Harsh
Gaurav Prabhu,
He's
can you request
asking.
whose question you are asking? If they can just switch on the camera if they're comfortable. If not, that's fine. So it's for everyone. If your question is asked, so please at least at that point of time have your camera on so I know who I'm speaking to. Gaurav Prabhu, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just checking whether he's there or not. That's for Harsh. Harsh,
Okay.
are you there? Harsh. Oh, it's Harshita. Oh no, it's Harsh Mutha.
Harshita, it's Harshita.
Okay, the query is Prahlad Maharaj was such a pure and highly spiritual, then why he was born in a family?
No, it's not my query.
No,
The
that's
question.
Harsh Mutha.
That's of Harsha.
Yeah.
That's that student, eighth standard student. So he's asking Prahlad Maharaj was such a great personality. Why was he born in a demonic family? That was the plan of the Lord. That was a curse. Not sorry. In case of Prahlad Maharaj, that was Hiranyakashipu was cursed. That was a plan of the. How should I say? I'll say this way, because it's in the context of it. How Prahlad Maharaj, such a great devotee, was born to Hiranyakashipu? Because the wife. Gaurav, there is a lot of background noise. I guess in your side, huh? So, because the wife of Hiranyakashipu, she got, when she was pregnant with Prahlad, she got the association of Narad Muni. And Narad Muni instructed her on the principles, on the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, which Prahlad Maharaj heard when he was in the womb of his mother. That's the reason when a mother is pregnant, it is strongly advised to her to read books like Krishna book, to read like Bhagavad Gita. Even if you fall asleep while reading, don't worry about it, because the child within the womb is hearing. So nothing happened to the mother of Prahlad. She didn't transform. But Prahlad Maharaj got transformed because he heard everything very carefully. Because even if you are asleep, your sense of hearing is active. So because of which Prahlad Maharaj could hear everything, and that's why he became a great devotee. Gaurav Prabhu, next question.
Yeah, next query is from Harshita Mataji. Mataji, you can unmute and ask your query.
Pranam Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, my query was, I didn't get when you started why you use Patanjali is compared with monkeys. I didn't get what is Patanjali.
Yeah, so Patanjali is the name of one of the acharyas, you can say,
Okay.
who had written Yoga Sutras.
Okay.
So he is the one who have described in detail about Yoga Sutras, prominently Ashtang Yoga process. And all the modern day yoga teachers, they know it or not, they all are getting their wisdom, or they're using the wisdom which Patanjali wrote in Yoga Sutras. Of course, probably most of them doesn't know it, but that's the whole thing. So that's what I was quoting. When it comes to yoga, Patanjali is a master in it. But Patanjali himself have quoted from Bhagavad Gita because Patanjali had appeared post Krishna's appearance.
Okay.
So that had happened later on.
Okay. Prabhuji, there is one more query. Many times you use the word hippie.
Oh, hippie.
Yeah.
So hippie referred to those great personalities that they became totally frustrated from their rich family life.
Okay.
And they took upon the life of a renunciation. I'm just joking, huh? They didn't take a life of renunciation. They didn't do it. They got so frustrated with their culture, Western culture, civilization. They thought, we need to enjoy. We don't need to work. We just need to enjoy. So they wasted their life in drink, in drugs, in all kind of sinful activities. But they all were kids of very rich parents and families back in America and Europe.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Eat, love, and marry was their concept.
Okay.
That was their ideology. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, next question is, I have to check by whom it is, but he's asking what is the etymology of Ashtang Yoga. Etymology. That
I
is
really didn't get
asked
the
by.
question. If the person is there, you can ask him to ask, or else you can go to the next question.
Yes, the person is here. Yeah, it's
So he
from
can.
Tarun. Tarun Prabhu, that's your query?
Yeah, Prabhuji,
Yes, sir.
Prabhuji, what does it mean by Ashtang Yoga? Ashtang means what is
Ha. Ashta Anga Yoga means, Anga means, Ashta means 8. It has 8 steps, Anga, 8 parts. Ashtanga Yoga. Ashta, 8. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. इन 8 अंगों को एक साथ कहा जाता है अष्टांग योगा, और अष्टांग योगा का सबसेट है हठ योगा and meditation, what is very famous today. That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah, Prabhu. Next query is from Upma Mataji. She's asking if anyone
Oh, we
is
already
involved
answered
in.
one query by Mother Upma, right?
Yes, yes. So that's why all other questions are now answered. So I
Yes.
came back to her for the second question. She's asking if someone is involved in any of the wrongdoings, the 4 prohibitions that you have mentioned, then even if he leaves it, will he be fit for the yoga or bhakti or not?
Oh, yes, that's what I said. That's the whole thing we discussed about Bhakti Yoga. It just does not matter what we did in the past. What matters now is what we do in the present. Now, what you and I can learn from our past is if we have done mistakes in the past, we should cultivate repentance. Repentance that I should not repeat it again.
Prabhuji, in this way, it will be in my mind always. Something like that.
So that's good. That will make you humble. Let me give you an example. Let's say if you are afraid, let's say when you go to the kitchen, and if you are afraid of getting your hands burnt of fire, okay? So do you agree? You will be very conscious when you're cooking in the kitchen?
Yeah, true.
That's the whole point. If we are afraid and if we become conscious of what mistakes I have done in the past, and if we repent for it, then we'll be like, oh, I don't want to do that mistake now.
Yeah, true.
That's a positive side of it. The negative side of it is if you become emotionally disturbed and you keep on saying, oh, I wasted my life, and because of that, you don't do what you're supposed to do. You don't do the positive thing. Then it is a negative application of it.
We should be doing the positive aspect of it, keeping it in mind, but in the positive aspect that I will not do it again, right?
Yeah, so that's a repentance. That I
That is
repent in the sense that I would not gonna do those things and let me do the good things, the positive things. And I'll tell you seriously, when you put your mind and energy in the positive aspects, these aspects of ABC, ABCD, you will get so much enjoyment, so much satisfaction. You will not have any taste for those things. There will be no risk of falling back again. Krishna says, Param Drishtva Nivartate in that context. So, my request to all of you right now, the easiest thing that all of you can begin, if you're not practicing devotee right now, is the process of chanting.
Yes.
Because to take Krishna Prasadam and all that may require a little adjustment in your setup. But no adjustment is needed for one to take to chanting. Only adjustment needed is to cut off your time from the waste time and the worry time.
Prabhuji, Krishna Prasadam is something different from what we cook in the kitchen.
See, foremost
It is
is
proper vegetarian then.
perfect. It's a vegetarian thing. Then you just have to offer to the Lord.
Only
At this point in time, in case we have not discussed about this, maybe in a future session we'll talk about how to apply Bhakti Yoga in family life. At this point of time, just before honoring, I said in one of the class, before honoring the food, offer a prayer of gratitude.
Okay.
Which helps us to recognize and remember that it is Krishna or the Lord which is providing us everything.
Okay,
My
Prabhu.
dear Lord, thank you so much for providing us the meals. Thank you so much for this. I'm eternally grateful for this. And kindly accept this simple offering that I've prepared for you as an offering of service. And just offer simple prayer and you can honor it to begin with. And how to properly honor it, we can discuss that. Okay?
Yep.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. अब
The
कहाँ
next
से
query is from you.
थोड़ा शांत कर लो प्रभु जी, मैं मुरादाबाद से हूँ अभी।
Okay. Thank you.
जी
Yes, go.
Yeah, Prabhu. Next query is from Prasad Prabhu from YouTube. He's asking, if we see at sun, then we go blind. Then how people could be able to see Lord Krishna, who has millions sun's brightness?
Don't worry about it. When Arjuna had requested Krishna to show his Virat Roop, Arjuna could not see Virat Roop. So Krishna gave him the vision. So you don't worry about it. Krishna will give you the vision so that you can see him. leave some task for Krishna also to do na. सारा काम हमें क्यों करने का है भाई? This is the major problem with this karmatmak of mind. हमको ही करने का है सब कुछ. The doership mentality is very strong. Don't worry, Krishna will take care of it. God, what's next?
Next query is from Dipali Mataji. Dipali Mataji, you can unmute and ask your query.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
My question is that maybe because I'm confused, how karma yoga is different from bhakti yoga, because in both the cases the mind is set on him only, and at both the places we are talking about detachment only.
Correct.
How do I distinguish between both?
Karma yoga, in one sense, in our level of practice, karma yoga and bhakti yoga is same. In our practice, where we are trying to practice. See, at our stage, at a sadhana bhakti stage, what we practice is karma yoga, where we try to engage the results of our work in the service of the Lord. These will be described more in details in the 12th chapter, verse number 8 to 12, verse number 8 to 11. Now, what is bhakti yoga? Which means the person lives his life or her life completely in union with the Lord.
Is it like Meera?
Yeah, you can call it that's Meera or the great personalities. That's but in which your every moment of your life is in the service of the Lord. So, in one sense, bhakti yoga, karma yoga are not different. But bhakti yoga refers to that stage where you're completely in union with the Lord. So the karma yoga becomes a stepping stone for us to reach that stage, which is advanced stage. At our level, while performing karma yoga, we are doing bhakti yoga because the object of our bhakti is clear, Krishna, and we are trying to engage in service according to Guru Sadhu Shastra. But technically, there is a difference. Technically, it will be called as karma yoga because right now we are not able to engage ourselves fully as the requirement of a bhakti yoga. Right now, we are using the results of our work in the Krishna service. Maybe by our speech, we are glorifying the Lord. Maybe sometime in a day, with our mind, we remember the Lord. But when it reaches its culmination, that is called as bhakti yoga.
Because when I look at Arjuna, I can see he was into karma yoga. When I look at Meera, I can distinguish that yes, they are into this.
No, Arjuna was not in karma yoga.
Okay.
Because Arjuna did everything under the instruction of the Lord. That way it becomes bhakti yoga. Now Arjuna was such a dear person to Krishna.
Yes, he was a devotee. Yes.
Oh. So maybe because you have heard more about Meera, so you could relate with Meera more than with Arjuna.
Yes, whenever we think of bhakti yoga, Meera comes to my mind.
Because you're thinking of Arjuna only from the perspective of the battle of Kurukshetra.
Yes.
So there Krishna said, your remembrance of me is to perform your duty. Now, he cannot, while fighting in a battle, he cannot act like a Meera. Yes?
Right.
That is bhakti yoga for Arjuna. Because he did that what he had to do. So that is bhakti yoga, is complete bhakti yoga. See, Meera was a renunciate. She took to renunciation later on, you know. And of course, before renunciation also, I mean, she was not that she had to go and perform. I don't think so. She was a mother. She didn't have a child.
Yeah.
You know, when she was married, then that's the time she left away. So as such, she didn't have any active responsibility where she had to spend time to be absorbed her consciousness. She was not going to an IT company. Fortunately, there were no IT companies at that time. She wasn't a mother either. So she could absorb herself. And when she took to renunciation path, then renunciation path is different. Anyways, you know, as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga is described, that's an advanced stage where she could give everything in service of the Lord.
Right.
So there's a technical difference, but as such, there is no difference. As long as with our capacity, we can serve and remember Lord, that is Bhakti Yoga.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Where are you from, Nepalji? Okay, you can unmute now.
Yeah, I'm basically from Pune. We recently shifted to Pune. Earlier, we were in Delhi.
Okay. Where are you staying in Pune now?
In Hadapsar.
Okay, I'm asking about Pune as if I know a lot about Pune. That's all right. I've heard the name of Adapsar. Okay, thank you. Prabhu, what's next?
Yeah, Prabhu, there is no more questions in the chat box. So
Okay.
maybe we can quickly check if anyone has any query, then we can ask, or then we otherwise we'll wind up.
I have a question.
I guess everyone will be hungry also. It's time for the dinner. Somebody saying something?
Prabhuji, I
Yeah,
have a
Anushri
question.
Mataji has a query.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prabhuji,
Mataji,
if you
if you
don't
can.
mind, I have a question related to yesterday's session. Can
Yes,
I
please.
ask?
Yes.
Prabhuji, so you were talking about it is not it is not good or it is not recommended to kill animals or to kill things, yeah, because they are all we are all part of God. But what about, I'm asking very practical question. I'm sorry if I cross some limit.
No,
But
no,
what
no, no. Go
but
ahead.
but what about if we do pest control? I mean, very very practical thing which I'm asking. If we
Correct.
we do pest control at home, because I was doing it today and this came to my mind, your thing came to my mind. So how do we kill how do we cut this karmic reactions if we are unknowingly doing it or so, something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, got your question for that. See, animal killing is prohibited, totally agreed upon it. The foremost of the idea of animal killing is to kill animals for one's appetite.
Okay.
That is sinful.
Okay.
Yudhishthira Maharaj asked Bhishma Pitamaha in Anushasan Parv of Mahabharata, as a king, what is my duty towards a citizen? In terms of their eating habits, should we allow non-vegetarian diet? And that time Bhishma Pitama responded, Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. Non-violence is the highest dharma. So that is totally not allowed. Now, similarly, Kshatriyas, we know of from the previous ages, Kshatriyas would go to the forest and they would hunt animals. They were allowed to hunt animals, and there were three conditions for it. First, because as a Kshatriyas, they need to practice. They had to have a live combat to prepare themselves to fight with the enemies, so they were allowed for that. Second reason, they were allowed to kill animals to protect the sages and to control their population, particularly the wild animals. Cow and bull was never ever part of killing because they were not wild animals. They were, they were like pet animals. And so they were not killing goats and pigs and all that, but the wild animals which are dangerous for the well-being of sages. And third was allowed for sacrifice because in those days sacrifice used to happen. So these are 2-3 reasons which are mentioned. So it's not as totally prohibited. In certain situations is allowed. Now, similarly in your case, just imagine as a mosquito comes on your arm and bites you, and you catch that mosquito. तेरा क्या होगा कालिया? जिंदा छोड़ू या मार दूं?
Yeah.
Now the point is because he already did an act of violence by biting you. In your defense, you can kill him.
Okay.
That is allowed. Now the pest control here, the pest is always definitely going to cause a lot of damage. So in that, you're doing the pest control is fine. Of course, there would be a reaction. Well, focus on the positive aspect of Krishna consciousness, do the needful thing, then all will be taken care. because this is not impractical. You're not doing something just because you want to cause harm to the animals.
Got it.
At your side, now moving forward, you can try your best, because the pest happens because maybe the house had been kept unclean, or maybe there were a lot of cooked items which were not clean or thrown away in time. Maybe at your side, you can take care of the cleanliness aspect more carefully, so that you reduce the chances of pest coming again in future. That much only you can try. But if it again happens, you have to go for pest control.
Yeah, yeah. Got that.
So that way is okay.
Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Prabhu. One last query from Srinivas, Prabhu. Prabhu, you can unmute and ask.
Yeah, thanks. Prabhu, my ignorant question is, like, I know that spiritual thinking would give.
All questions are very intelligent.
Yeah, my
intelligent people can ask question. I'm not saying that. That's a version of Bhagavad Gita. Huh?
Yeah. But the spiritual thinking or spiritual process would definitely give the ecstasy or the happiness that that we look for. But does it make us, like, not to respond for the things that are happening just outside, external things, like right next to your next door, probably some dacoits or someone come, and then something happens there. Doesn't it, like, because of the spiritual thinking, like, I might think that, like, well,
it is never like that. The spirituality does not take away your guna and karma. Like Arjuna. Arjuna was a devotee of the Lord all through. It is not Arjuna became a devotee after hearing Bhagavad Gita. Now that same Arjuna, when the Sabha Mahal, when Indraprastha was created, a Brahmana came running to Arjuna. Please, please protect me. Somebody has stolen my cow. Arjuna immediately ran to protect. Yes, sir? So I would say this is a little immature understanding of spirituality. Just like we have an immature understanding of spirituality means renunciation or the saffron attire. Similarly, this is another aspect of immature understanding of spirituality means that we will become so detached or unaffected or unbothered about what's happening in this world. It doesn't happen like that. You continue to act what you have to act, but now your behavior and your response, everything gets changed slowly, because now you act on a platform of knowledge, knowing what is best, what is the need of the hour, and how should I be behaving at this point of time. Because you're cultivating knowledge, you're cultivating scriptural knowledge that empowers you with the right understanding of how to react, how to respond. It doesn't take away the basic human nature that we have to care for each other, to protect each other. It doesn't take away that.
So had that been the case, like, for the last 1,000 years, we wouldn't have been slaved, right? Like the challenge,
okay,
because of our automatic, or the spiritual thinking, we know how to reach the God. So probably that could be the reason, like, why we wouldn't have fought with other.
So you're asking, so you're asking why India had been in a foreign rule for 1,000 years, right?
Correct. Yeah.
The very first thing, nothing happens in the creation without the will of the Lord. So first thing you can understand for sure, that was the will of the Lord that was supposed to happen. Now, I'll give you other reasons. This is a philosophical reason to say will of the Lord, everything happens with the will of the Lord. Second thing, all of us reap the results of our own karmic reaction. So the karma also comes into place. Now, it is not only a Bharatvarsh had been in a foreign rule. If you look at the history of the rest of the world in 1,000 years, it has been far much worse than what had happened in Bharat. To give you an example, Iran, which was a Persian nation, within 25 years of the rules of the Muslim, became completely Muslim nation. Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, all the South Asian countries, even 1,000 years later, you and I are Hindu today. Why? Because of spirituality. Spirituality protected it. So if you see the history of the world, war had been all over the place. Sometime there was Alexander the Great, then there was this Chinese, what was his name? Who had taken almost up to the part of From Kazakhstan, or anyone knows?
Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan, yeah, Mongolian.
He had taken most of part of it. He could not come to India. He couldn't cross Himalayas, but he had taken almost up to the part of Middle East and Europe. The history have kept on changing because that is a symptom of Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, there are no Kshatriyas. There is no one powerful Kshatriya ruler, Dharmic ruler, who could protect the kingdom, who can establish the rule of Dharma. Everyone is a rogue. Everyone is a thief. So thieves going to fight with each other. After independence, did you had a very great government? Whoever came was another big thief. So, have you really received independence? So that's the whole thing. All right, spirituality actually protected that despite 1,000-year rule, we still have flourishing spirituality. And still so much efforts are being made to somehow destroy Hinduism. I'm speaking in the language of Hinduism because that's how we relate to each other. So much efforts are being made through the means of education, through the means of the movies, through the means of the news, through the means of the politics, through the means of religion. I don't want to tell you all the details of it, but you ask, I'll give you one example. Just 3 days ago, I got a WhatsApp message from a leader from Chhattisgarh, and he sent me a photo of people wearing a saffron dress and having a cross around their neck. And they're going to villages and converting people to Christianity by wearing a saffron dress, sadhu attire. I have seen churches which are made like temples. There you have idols of Jesus, just so that because the people relate to it. So many things are going on. My point is, do not get discouraged from any of those things. Will the world end today? Will there be a nuclear war tomorrow? Well, if Krishna wants the world to end, it will end, whatever you may try to do to stop it. Will COVID wipe out the whole population of the world? Well, if this is what is supposed to happen, that will happen, which you and I cannot do anything about it. So let's not get too much worried about all those things. Focus on the present. Chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. That will give us sanity of mind, and that will free us from the fear. That's the point.
Thanks, Prabhu.
Thank you for your intelligent question. It was a fantastic question, Srinivasi. All right. All of you will be very tired now. We're almost close to 2 hours of our program. So we sincerely thank all of you for being with us. Bapu, I guess I've done my business. You answered everyone's question.
Yes, Prabhu, all questions are answered. So there are no more questions.
All right. So thank you. Have a wonderful week ahead. We'll meet again on Thursday for a question answer discussion, and on Saturday for the overview of the first 6 chapters. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.